Hey, what's up, guys? This is Jag with the JB podcast. So, today I'm going to be doing a video that's a little bit different than what I usually talk about, like during the season and stuff. And it's not player oriented really, but it's kind of interesting. Would you like to see the NBA expand teams? So instead of a 30 team league, like 32 team league, like the NFL, because I ran into this article a few months back. Well, it's like dated in January, so it was written a few months back, and it's on 16 Wins a Ring. Usually, I've read a few of their articles on there. I don't know how close they are, if they're insiders or not with the NBA. So I would take this with a little grain of salt, honestly. But what it basically says is that the NBA wants to expand to more teams and then preferably in the Western Conference and then move Memphis into the Eastern Conference, which I don't really get why it's in the West anyway. They kind of get the shaft with the schedule because they have to play more games in the West and fly more and stuff. So yeah, I'll leave the article in the description below. And the two places that are looking at, well, they want two teams, and they're kind of debating between three choices. This article says, one is Seattle, which they've been dying for a team ever since OKC left them, ever since they lost the Supersonics. And then the second is Louisville. Um, I was kind of surprised in that, especially since it's supposed to be more of a Western team that they want, but and it's like a college town. And then the third is really interesting. It's Mexico City. And then they have a few others that they're debating between that it just mentions that they might not be seriously considering in Las Vegas and Vancouver. So, first off, Seattle. It would be good to see another team in Seattle because everyone's pushing for it. I know a few years ago Russell Wilson was like pushing for it really hard when it looked like the Kings might be for sale until the mayor helped with that new stadium, building the new stadium, and like they got bought by like a bunch of billionaires in a group um, with Vivek. I think his last name is Ranadive. He ended up buying the majority of the team and keeping it in Sacramento. And so Seattle wants a team supposedly, but the only problem I see with that is there's a reason the team left. I mean, the fans weren't coming to enough games, or it wasn't generating enough money, or something. There's a reason they had to leave, and OKC had the opportunity. Excuse me, OKC had the opportunity to buy them. You know what I mean? So they want a team, but will the fans really support it, and will it generate enough money for them to keep the team in Seattle? But it would be great to see there. And then the second option, Louisville. I'm not sure about that because I know it's more of a. Even the article states this is more of a college area, so like they might be thirsting for an NBA team. Who knows? They certainly love basketball there. But it's saying that Louisville isn't really a serious contender anyway. But would you guys like to see an NBA team in Louisville? I'm kind of indifferent about it, honestly. But the third option is Mexico City, which is extremely interesting. Would we already have a team in Canada, Toronto? Would you guys like to see a team down south in Mexico City, in one of the biggest cities in the world? A few problems that might come up with that is one, uh, sometimes it's hard to get like visas and everything sorted out just to go to Toronto games. I know the Cavs were held up in the airport last year during the playoffs just trying to get to Toronto. Who knows what problems might come going all the way down to Mexico, you know. And then another problem is, would players like that? Like players would have to start becoming bilingual because you never know if you'll end up in Mexico City or not on a team. Um, would players enjoy that? I mean, the the salary would most likely be the same. So like $30 million in Mexico is a lot more impactful to a person than $30 million in the U.S. And the only another problem with that is, would Mexico City generate enough money? Because they do play some preseason games every year there, and they always sell out. So they have the fandom, but do they have the revenue capability that an NBA team would have to be able to keep the cap consistent? You know, it would be the only basketball team, like NBA, professional NBA team there. So maybe the whole country would take trips down there to go to games, But and it is one of the biggest countries. I mean, one of the biggest cities in the whole world. So like with enough people, maybe, but they'd have to basically be selling out every single night to generate the money that even a smaller market like New Orleans generates in the NBA. So the money thing, but the thing is, the person that wants to buy it or be a majority owner, in the article it says Carlos Slim, and he's one of the richest people in the whole world. So no doubt he could support the team, and he could even overpay for a team like Steve Ballmer did. I mean, he has a lot of money, but if his team isn't if his team isn't making a lot of money and paying for itself, I'm not sure if he would just do it as a hobby. I don't know how much he loves basketball. And who knows, maybe he loves basketball and he could be a great owner like Lacob in Golden State. But then again, he could be like James Dolan with the New York Knicks, just deep pockets, doesn't know much about basketball, making terrible moves and terrible trades. But who knows? Mexico City would be awesome, I think, for the NBA and just for the country in general and professional sports to go down there in Mexico and still be part of the U.S. And it's more of a soccer area, so I know the NBA wants to expand down there and expand the game in other countries that are more heavily soccer oriented or football, oriented. The other options they weren't really serious about in the article. One's Las Vegas. The only problem is, again, would it generate enough money? Would enough people go? In the recession, they were talking about moving. A lot of professional leagues were talking about a team in Las Vegas, but they got hit pretty hard with the housing crisis. So they're like, oh no, tourism isn't enough to keep a team down there. But now that they're kind of out of that more, who knows? The LA Raiders, or excuse me, the Oakland Raiders just barely moved to Las Vegas. And if they're successful, maybe the NBA, because the NFL is a much bigger league than the NBA. It generates like 6 times the money the NBA does yearly. So if the Raiders are successful, maybe look to see the NBA move a team to Las Vegas, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. And the other one is Vancouver. For those of you that don't know, in the 90s, Vancouver actually already had a team, and they were awful. Okay, they were so bad. They only had a team for a few years, and the NBA is like, nope. They didn't have the fan attendance, and another problem with expansion teams, it's really hard to get them up and running. That's why, an example like Orlando Magic, they sucked. They got Nick Anderson, and then a big reason why they think they rigged that draft to get Shaq there is because it was a new market, and for a new team, they have to do an expansion draft where basically every team throws in, where every team throws in their 2 to 3 worst players on their roster, and they go to the expansion draft, and obviously, and then like they get like the first picks and stuff too of the actual NBA draft as well, and so basically it's comprised of a bunch of either crappy players, not very good players, or just young guys, from the draft. And that's why it's really hard for an expansion team, unless they draft a star like someone like Shaq, for them to actually keep their team there and relevant. And that's another thing. It's kind of used little to bring Michael Jordan's accomplishments down to earth. Is in the 90s there were 6 expansion teams, which so which they say like inflated the Bulls' records. And that's kind of offset now because one, the league is more talented than ever, but also teams are just straight up tanking for good draft picks to get good players in the draft. And back then, it was teams probably did tank more, but it wasn't so prevalent, and people didn't know like, oh yeah, they're tanking for this player. It wasn't all over the news, and like it seems like teams now are like kind of proud of it. Like Sam Hinkie straight up acknowledges basically that they were losing for a while so they could get good players, and then it looks like it's ending up great for Philadelphia because they got Embiid, Simmons, and possibly two lottery picks this year, and Dario Saric, who look great. So if it works out for Philadelphia, look for a lot more teams to start doing it. So even if there is an expansion team, there will probably be inflated records at the top anyway because of tanking teams. But yeah, I just want to know, what do you guys think of this? Do you guys think this will be good for the NBA to stretch to 32 teams? Um, oh wait, actually, before I end, one more thing. They want to move two teams to the West so they can finally move to Memphis. I mentioned it earlier, and I agree with that, honestly. Like, I don't know why Memphis is in the East to begin with, but what I would have, a few years ago when Atlanta was actually good and got the first seed and not mediocre like they always are every year, um, when they got the first seed, they had one of the worst attendances in the whole NBA. So back then, I was saying, why not Seattle buy Atlanta, bring them there, and then move Memphis to the East? I thought that made sense. But now Atlanta, I'm not sure where their attendance is. I think it's more middle of the pack now, and especially because Dwight is back, hometown guy. I think it's more middle of the pack. But if it is lower end, then I don't see why Seattle couldn't pick up that team over there, or someone in the West could buy a team out there in Atlanta and then move Memphis too. That would also shake it up because Memphis is always a pretty good defensive team and always middle of the pack in the West. So, and we know the West is stronger than the East for now. So they might be a top four type seed in the East. That could shake things up. And so yeah, um, and that's where I'll end it, I guess. What do you guys think? Would you guys want an expansion? Would you guys like to see two more teams, 32 team like the NFL? Um, what do you guys think it would mean for the NBA? Maybe they would go to Vancouver and Mexico City for the two new teams. Would you guys even like to see them in Mexico? I personally think it would be good for the NBA. I just don't know if it would be sustainable. And please like, subscribe, and again, the article is down below if you guys want to check that out. And I'll see you guys next time.